Hello there. So I've been long planning a comprehensive list of great American English words, or at least great as I see them. And I thought I'd take this opportunity today to put together 20 of the greatest American English words ranked by yours truly. Now, I should state that these words it's not really ranked on practicality or anything like that. It's just simply ranked on how good they sound when they come out of your mouth. Some words just sound better than others. It's a fact of life. I should also state that these words are not necessarily always absolutely exclusive to American English, or at least now, but the rule is here that they were coined in America. They originated within American English, and then in some cases spread far and wide. In some cases didn't. They stayed here, and in some cases they became archaic and just weren't used ever again. And you watching at home might be listening to these words and thinking, I don't know that word and I'm American. You know, it could just be that it's regional, or that it just didn't make it to your neck of the woods, and that's fine. That's often the case with language, especially when you've got a country so big as the United States of America is. But I just thought, you know, British English gets wide appreciation for its lexicon, and I thought we should do the same here today for American English. So without further ado, let's start my countdown from 20 to 1. Oh, panhandle. I don't know if it's because it sounds like manhandle and isn't that, or if it's just a good word. Now, I understand that it came about to sort of describe something that actually resembles the handle of a pan, so a panhandle. Now, the word can be used in various ways here in the United States, but specifically geographically. That reference is from about 1856. That's when it was first attested from, and in fact, you'll find a lot of these fanciful words date back to the Victorian age, the 19th century specifically, but it was used originally in reference to Virginia, and it's since expanded to describe districts in Florida, Texas, Idaho, Oklahoma, and Alaska, among others. And it also has the meaning of an act of begging. And they think the potential there is that one sticking out one's arm looks like a panhandle. I think that's what they think the etymology of the word could be. So that's it. Panhandle. What a way to get started. Let's get on with number 2. Fuddy-duddy is a great word. I mean, it's obviously got the rhyming quality to it, but it just means an old-fashioned person. It's first attested from 1871. The origins of it are quite uncertain by the sounds of it, but some experts, some linguists, think it might be traced back to an old Northern English phrase, duddy-fuddial. But a fuddy-duddy, a good example of that would be somebody with a comb-over and thick glasses. So if you know anybody fitting that description, let me know below. The word humdinger is a fine example of a humdinger. It's a superlative, basically, and it traces back to the late 19th century, yet again, potentially, it is believed, potentially a blending of the word hummer, which had a sort of similar meaning in American English back in the 19th century and early 20th century, and the word dinger, which is supposedly English slang, again with similar meaning, and they just put the two together, potentially, there's never been fully confirmed, to create this word humdinger. Oh, American English is all about its H's, isn't it? Humdinger, but also doohickey. And doohickey's a very interesting one. It's a name for something that one doesn't know the name of, which is interesting because there are other words that sort of fit that bill. But this one is sort of traced back to early 20th century. They think about 1914 is the first attestation for it. Possibly a blending of doodad, which itself, as I just said there, is a word that has that same meaning as doohickey, blended with the word hickey, which nowadays, of course, means kind of a love bite, as we would say in England, where you bite somebody on the neck lovingly and leave a slight mark. But the word hickey used to mean something of little consequence. So I suppose something that for which you forget the name may well have little consequence, and you can quite see why the blending of those two words to make doohickey would have come about. Now, perhaps if you disbelieve the etymology that I just gave for the previous word, or any of the words on this list, then you might describe it as cockamamie, an absolutely brilliant word, which I can imagine being in sort of films from the 1950s. But cockamamie, yes, just means mixed up, ridiculous, implausible. American English slang, it was first attested around the 1940s, but it may predate any of the sort of attestations that they find in text, because there's a belief that it actually goes back to New York City in the 1920s, and was sort of children's slang back in that day. Cowabunga. Well, anybody who was a fan of the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, Ninja, of course, in the United States, will know that phrase. It was a popular phrase of Michelangelo, but did you know it was actually popularized, I should say, even perhaps coined, in a different TV show, one from the 1950s. This was the Howdy-Doody show, which I know from having watched Back to the Future. Other than that, that's my only reference to it. But it just meant a sort of exclamation of surprise and anger by Chief Thunderthud in that very show from the 1950s. But like I said, it did, of course, get reused by Michelangelo in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and before then, and sort of since then, potentially used by surfers as well, although that sounds quite a stereotype of surfers that I'm not willing to propagate without thorough research. So, Cowabunga, dude. Dude is a bonus entry. Oh, malarkey, malarkey, malarkey. Well, just like with cockamamie, it has a sort of similar meaning in many ways. Lies and exaggerations, humbug, as, you know, he might have said in A Christmas Carol. First attested, they think, from about 1924. There was a similar word kicking about at that time, and an almost better word, but I just wanted to include malarkey in its place because malarkey is sort of more well-known. And that word was acamaracus from 1934. Meant the same thing. The origin of the word malarkey is kind of unknown, but they think there may be a potential link to the Irish last name Malarkey, but they haven't found any kind of fit for that particular connection at press time. Ah, yes, ornery. I have talked about this word, of course, in a couple of videos, one of which I plotted geographically the use, or rather the pronunciation of ornery. Do you pronounce it with an R in that first R, or do you just drop it and say ornery? There does seem to be a geographic pattern behind that difference. But the word ornery, a dialectal contraction of the word ordinary, and it fell into use in American English in about 1816, or at least that's the first attestation of it. And its meaning has changed a little over time, but of course nowadays it either means sort of cantankerous or mischievous, depending on who you speak to. But in the meantime, let's move on to number 12. Valedictorian. So I went to university, of course, in England at Lancaster University, and valedictorian was never really a word that I encountered, I don't think, and it turns out it is somewhat rare in the United Kingdom. You might hear it on occasion, but certainly it is a big word around the universities of the United States, and that's because the word itself was coined here. Now, it's sort of a term that is an anglicized derivation of a sort of Latin phrase, the Latin phrase valedicere, which means to say farewell. But the word valedictorian in this sense, you know, came about in about 1832, and a valedictorian is basically a student who pronounces the oration at commencement exercises of his or her class. Speaking of students, they may well be interested in our next entry. So if I was to say Lollapalooza to you, what would it mean? I think most of you might know it as a music festival that takes place in this country. I think it's every August. We certainly have festivities going on here in Chicago, but the word very much predates the festival. In fact, the word itself influenced the festival name. So the festival was founded by Perry Farrell. He is of the band Jane's Addiction, and he named it in honor of the word, of course. But he'd heard the word in a Three Stooges film, and that's where he got the name from for the festival. But the word itself actually predates the Three Stooges film in question. They traced it back to about 1896, again the first attestation of it, and it just meant remarkable or a wonderful person or thing. Somebody who's a Lollapalooza. You know, I'm a Lollapalooza, or is it just loser? One of the two. Don't answer that. I absolutely love this word. I sort of only became aware of its etymology very recently when I was putting together this list. Before then, I thought that the festival name came first and that nothing else mattered after that. But I'll drink to that potentially at Lollapalooza later this year. Maybe. That would be strange. But speaking of long words that against all odds have positive meanings, let's start our top 10 countdown. So two things. Who in their right mind thought that pulchritudinous would be an excellent word to mean beautiful? Well, that is exactly what it means. But not only that, the word itself in its entirety was coined here in the United States. It's first attested from about 1877. Previously, of course, there was the word pulchritude, and that actually dates back much further. But the adjective was coined here in America, which is an amazing, and it's not the only P word that you can't believe was coined in America. That brings us on to entry number 9. I've covered this word previously in another video, but it certainly makes my top 10 because, firstly, it's one of those words that I think a lot of people assume is British, of British origin. It's not. I mean, certainly we use it, and I think we possibly, nowadays anyway, at least in the 21st century, maybe more so in the 20th century, used it in greater abundance than Americans, but it certainly found life and was born here in the United States. Again, it was in the 19th century, dates back to about 1865, probably, they believe, from a Dutch dialect, from the Dutch dialectal word POPPYCOCK, if that's the correct pronunciation, I hope it is, or from Middle Dutch pape, which was a soft food, and its meaning sort of evolved over time. It's found broadly in the writings of the American comic Artemus Ward, who used it, I think, in reference to the US Congress of the time. So poppycock, of course, another word on this list, which just means basically that's rubbish, that can't be believed. So perhaps says something about American fanciful words. Cattywampus is a phenomenal word. I think we can all agree on that. And it has a sort of similar origins in many ways to catacorner, which is another American English word, sort of talking about diagonal to something. But catawampus means not lined up or not arranged correctly or diagonally. And it's first attested from about 1843. Now, interestingly, records suggest that an adverb, which was catawampusly, actually preceded the word catawampus. It came before it, and from that they extracted catawampus, which sounds like a medical procedure, not a very nice one, may I add, and that's how the word came about. Now, ultimately, both words may derive, possibly, from the Scots word wampish, which sort of means to wriggle, to twist, or to swerve. So that's an interesting thing. So broken up into two, the catty part comes from the same sort of area as catacorner, and as I said, wampus possibly from Scots English. You know, I was torn between putting this in my top 5 and not, because it is a fantastic word. I've only just been introduced to it, actually. I put a sort of tweet out about it the other day. But snollygoster, I mean, it basically just means a shrewd, unprincipled person, or at least did. I mean, it's not in wide use today, of course. But again, it's another one that came out of the 19th century. It is first attested from 1846. Once again, the origin is slightly uncertain with this one, but some people think that it might be connected with the German phrase Schnellgeister, which literally means quick spirits. I could almost see that. I mean, I suppose somebody who is a sort of shrewd, unprincipled person might be somebody that is quick-witted or quick-moving to avoid detection. So you could almost see it coming from that. But again, it's undetermined, much like our next entry. Highfalutin is a bloody brilliant word, and notice there's no G at the end of it. Potentially, of course, there was at one time, but it got dropped, and we ended up with this word. This is how it's spelled in the dictionary, usually sans apostrophe at the end, but it just means somebody who is pompous, arrogant, or haughty, pretentious, that kind of thing, that they are excessively ornate or bombastic. They are highfalutin, and there's sort of a few theories as to where this comes from, but one of the leading ones is that, firstly, the word high at the beginning is of the same origin as the actual word high, but the last part of it, the falutin part, there's some people think that that might come from the word flute, as in fluting, so highfalutin, and therefore could suggest that it came from the idea that it's sort of a high-pitched screech that nobody wants to listen to. No real consensus on that, but we do know that as a noun, it's first attested from 1848, and just before that came about our following word. So yes, we're down to the final 5, and conniption is one of my favourite words of all time, never mind in American English. Of course, you'll be able to say the same about the 4 that are about to follow it. But conniption, you know, an attack of hysteria, a tantrum of sorts, first attested from 1833 in American English. Again, uncertain origin, but there's a certain probability that it's a fanciful formation related to the word corruption, which was used back then, actually, in a sense of anger, to be corrupt, meant to be angry, and that was from 1799, or from an English dialectal phrase which was canaptious, which did mean ill-tempered and was possibly itself a corruption of the word captious. You could go round in circles trying to find the origins of all of these words, but if you did so, it could leave you the following. That's right, discombobulated. I did find that this word has made it to the United Kingdom, although I don't recall it myself through my own experiences. But it certainly originated in the United States, and certainly around the same time as conniption, around about 1834. It came around actually at a time when there were sort of mock Latin coinages that were coming around, making the grade. But discombobulate sort of stayed the course, unlike a lot of words like scrumplicate and absquatulate and what else we've got, confusticate. Words of that ilk. And discombobulate is just one of those words. You could almost imagine Rowan Atkinson saying it in Blackadder, couldn't you? It's that sort of word. Actually, while we're on it, we could almost get Rowan Atkinson to pronounce our next entry. Boondoggle. Yes, I can absolutely see Blackadder saying that, but he would have no cause to, because it's not really a word that made it out to Britain, but was certainly again coined in the United States. It appears to be first attested from the 1930s, and it essentially just means a trivial, useless, or unnecessary undertaking, a wasteful expenditure. And it's, of course, like a lot of other American English words or fanciful coinages from America that have consecutive instances of the letter O. We've already looked, of course, at doohickey, and stay tuned for our final two entries because they also fall under that category. But like I said, it seems to have been coined in the 1930s, or at least first attested from then, and it's of an uncertain origin once again. I mean, this is quite a common theme throughout, because we didn't have the internet back then. You know, you couldn't just instantly trace back the origin of every single word, but of some of them. But it was popularized during FDR's The New Deal as a sort of contemptuous word for make-work projects for the unemployed. But other than that, like I said, the true origin of the word is uncertain. It could go way further back even than that. Perhaps you and I could team up to find out the answer. Perhaps we could be in this. Oh, cahoots is such a good word, and I use it unironically. I've used it in previous videos over the last few weeks without even realizing just how American it truly is, but it is. It goes back to the early 1800s, or 1829 is the first attestation they have of it. Once again, it does mean, you know, to be in company with, to be in partnership with another person, individual, or people. The origin, once again, is unclear, but the Oxford English Dictionary did say that perhaps it comes from the French word cahoot, which is a cabin or a hut. Of course, means something completely different in French, but that doesn't mean it didn't originate from that. Some US sources have credited it to another French word, which is the word cohort, which could make sense when you think of the English word cohort, so who knows? What I do know is that there were two English writers who didn't necessarily work in cahoots with each other, but both used famously our last and final entry. WHANGDOODLE, it's an amazing word. It's a word that's mostly gone by the wayside now, but it is a word nonetheless that was used by not only Julie Andrews, yes, Julie Andrews the actress, but also dabbled in writing children's books, one of which was called The Last of the Really Great WHANGDOODLES. It was also used by Roald Dahl, of course, in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and it basically just means an imaginary creature or thing. It's first attested from about 1858. Interestingly enough, of course, that was around the time that the first dinosaurs were starting to be found, or at least the first complete dinosaurs was sort of the mid-19th century, and then after that there was a rush of them. So don't know if it was sort of created with that in mind. Possibly it was created just with sort of literary monsters or creatures in mind. But either way, it is my absolute favourite American English word, and it's so typical of American English coinage. Once again, it's got that repeated instance of the letter O, and it's just something about that first monosyllabic first part, the wang part, followed by doodle. You know, it's like boondoggle and all of that. So absolutely brilliant word. I think it should be brought back, frankly, and I think that we should make that happen. So let me know in the comments below how we should do that. Also, let me know which words I missed out, because undoubtedly I did, but this is my opinion. And let me know what your favourite American English coinages are in the comments below. Until next time, take care. Thank you for watching this episode of Distant Words. Don't forget to hit my stupid little face to subscribe, and please share this video with the world. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and if you'd like to support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond.